Hey all and welcome back. It's a pretty light schedule this week, but sometimes these weeks are the best to be able to more closely follow a few games rather than jumping back and forth between several games. As usual, I'll be identifying 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 tight ends who are eligible for the 2025 NFL Draft that I'll be watching this weekend. Also, for an update, I know I switched to uploading these on Fridays, but after getting a message from someone mentioning that it's hard for them to watch the video before the weekend's game starts, and thinking ahead of possible future content I'm planning for later this year, I'll be switching the series to Tuesdays going forward. Sorry for the inconvenience, but I'm planning to stick with this, so hopefully that'll just be how it is for the rest of the college football season this year. If you want to make sure you don't miss future watchlist videos and future content, be sure to subscribe. With all that out of the way, let's see who's worth watching this weekend. Starting out the list with quarterbacks, we have Noah Fifita from Arizona. It hasn't been the greatest start for Fifita even against bad competition. Now, he has done a better job driving the ball downfield and making the Arizona offense more diverse than just a simple short pass and screen offense like they were in the start of 2023. However, I would still like to see him be more confident and quick in his decisions, driving the ball downfield more consistently, especially against lesser competition. Things won't be easier for Fifita this week as he will travel to 14th ranked Kansas State for a primetime Friday matchup. Fifita was able to step up against tough competition last season, and this will be his first big test to prove that he can do it again. If nothing else, I really want to see if Fifita can play bigger than his size by delivering accurate balls downfield and making plays out of structure. Right now, the best high ceiling comp I have for Fifita is Russell Wilson, which I've mentioned before is a lofty projection. However, Fifita will need to find a way to drive the ball downfield and make plays out of structure like Wilson did to make teams more confident with going with a smaller quarterback, especially with the possibility that Bryce Young might make the stigma of smaller quarterbacks even worse. So while many will likely be watching Tetairoa McMillan, who I'll obviously still be keeping an eye on, I'll be watching Fifita to see what he can do against a quality opponent this Friday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. Making his second appearance on this list and making it so early in the season due to the disastrous Week 1 performance, I'll be watching Weigman from Texas A&M. As bad as you can imagine a season debut for a potential top 3 quarterback is probably not as bad as Weigman was against Notre Dame to start the season. The excuse after the game was Notre Dame's elite defense shutting him down, which was a fair argument, until Notre Dame gave up nearly the same amount of points to Northern Illinois while playing at home. While Weigman did have a horrendous game, it's worth knowing that it was easily the worst game of his entire career. If you want to give him a mulligan for that, I think that's fair. Even if you don't want to give him a mulligan, I think it's only right to watch how he performs for the rest of the season to see what he's really capable of. Weigman had a nice rebound last week, but it came against a weak McNeese opponent, which would have been more shocking if he struggled against them. With the schedule picking up again, I'll be interested to see how Weigman plays against another quality opponent in Florida. So in what I'm naming the Redemption Bowl, if Graham Mertz is able to play, I'll be interested if Weigman can continue to rebuild his hype and draft stock on Saturday when he travels to Florida at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Going to running backs, though it isn't a tough matchup, I'm still planning to watch Kaleb Johnson from Iowa. Johnson originally caught my eye last season with some of the big runs he made, and he continued to impress me while watching the Iowa State game where he went for 187 yards on the ground with 2 touchdowns and added 3 receptions for 9 yards. From the bits I watched of him, I do think he falls into the tendency of bouncing runs outside and taking advantage of his speed, and while he already has matched his season high in receptions, he doesn't seem overly relied on in the passing game. So I'll be interested in checking him out to have a more clear idea what type of back he is and what he's capable of. Again, not a very hard matchup for him, but in a light week of matchups, I want to watch more out of curiosity and to see how much he might be worth monitoring for the rest of the season. If you want to track a possible riser with good size and good speed, be sure to watch Kaleb Johnson go up against Troy this Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern. On a similar note as Kaleb Johnson, I'll be watching Desmond Reid from Pitt this weekend as well. I was going back and forth with games last weekend and was watching some of the Pitt-Cincinnati game when Desmond Reid jumped out with his blazing speed. I was a bit surprised to see how great he looked after not being familiar with him, and then learned he was a transfer in Western Carolina from the FCS, so I'm going to give myself some slack there. Now, if you are watching the video, you'll probably see the 5'8", 175-pound frame and think, yeah, there's no way that's going to work in the NFL. And despite the picture, which admittedly is a bit unflattering of an angle for his size, he could still have a place on an NFL roster as a change of pace or a third down back if he can put some weight on and if a team knows how to use him. While the odds are against Desmond Reid panning out, I don't think it's unreasonable for him to potentially develop into a Tariq Cohen type of player. He already has the speed and great receiving ability, putting up nearly 150 yards on the ground and slightly over 100 yards in the receiving game. So now he just needs to keep it up and try to put some weight on. So while it again isn't the toughest matchup, I'll be watching Reid take on West Virginia on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern to see if he can continue to dominate and make more of an argument if his traits are sustainable. Going to receiver, I'll be interested to see if we can get to see the real Luther Burden III from Missouri. For the first 2 games, his production has been slightly underwhelming, in part due to Missouri not needing to use him with easy matchups. And while a matchup against Boston College may not be a nail-biter, they're still a ranked opponent and should give Missouri more of a fight than Buffalo or Murray State did. With how great Tetaroa McMillan started out in week 1, a lot of people started to shoot McMillan up to the top receiver in the class. Now, I had McMillan as my second best receiver in my summer rankings, but admitted in my rankings that the gap between McMillan and Burden isn't as great as some suggested over the summer, and McMillan's week 1 showed why I thought that. Now, McMillan did this against a weak New Mexico team, but production was impressive and still easily clears what Burden has done in the first 2 games this season. I do think it's a bit of overreaction to immediately push McMillan to the top receiver of the class this early, but I definitely understand the excitement. So I'm hoping to see Burden recapture that magic that made people excited about him in a game that the team likely will need to use him more. If he doesn't produce, it's not the end of the world since he still clearly passes the eye test, but I'd like to see him have a strong day against a number 24 ranked Boston College on Saturday at 12:45 p.m. Eastern to remind people just how talented he is. Another receiver who hasn't had that difficult a matchup so far, and likely won't have too many more this season, is Ricky White III from UNLV. White exploded last weekend against Utah Tech and really did all of his damage in the first quarter with 111 yards receiving and 3 touchdowns on just 6 targets. White's biggest fans love his explosiveness, and he showed that, and it was clear every time he touched the ball. Now, this was against a weak opponent, and White failing to do much against Houston the week before was pretty disappointing. So with another tough matchup against Kansas this Friday, it could be a good test to see what White can do against a quality opponent. With UNLV not having too many more difficult matchups for the rest of the season outside of a possible bowl appearance, it's crucial that White comes through with a good performance. So I'll be watching White and UNLV travel to Kansas to play the Jayhawks at 7 p.m. Eastern and see if White can prove he can do more than just beat up on lesser athletes. Finishing things out with tight ends, it might be a bit too early to come to too many conclusions for him as he's coming back from a torn ACL from 2023, but I'll be watching Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame. The team has been bringing Evans along slowly and slowly ramped up his snaps and routes in week 2 against Northern Illinois. While a matchup against Purdue doesn't sound tough on paper, neither did a home game against Northern Illinois. While Notre Dame should hopefully rebound and not need to rely on Evans as much, I'll still be interested to see if he can continue to have his usage ramp up as the season progresses. Last weekend made it clear that Riley Leonard needs a safety valve and a big, reliable target he can go to if the play isn't there. Evans can easily be that for Leonard, just as he was that for Sam Hartman last year before he got injured. So I'll be watching for how much Evans is relied on and what he's capable of doing when Notre Dame travels to Purdue to play them on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. Finishing out this week's list, I'll be watching Terrance Ferguson from Oregon. There weren't a lot of great tight end matchups I was interested in this weekend, but I haven't gotten much of a chance to focus on Ferguson, so I'll be interested to see how he does in a rivalry game against Oregon State. Ferguson isn't the most dynamic tight end in the prospective 2025 draft class, but he might be one of the most versatile ones, and you can probably tell from his snap distributions. He's a Swiss Army knife for an offense and pairs this with good receiving ability to be an asset for any offense. Oregon's offense has been solid but hasn't quite hit its stride as they've been trying to get some chemistry with the additions of Dylan Gabriel and Evan Stewart, but Ferguson has been a steady presence for the team to start the season. I expect that to continue, and we'll be watching for that when he travels to Oregon State to play them on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. Eastern. And that does it for players for week 3. It's a bit of an odd week, so I'm sure there's still players I missed that are worth watching. So let me know in the comments or on Twitter or X who you'll be watching this weekend. Again, I'll be moving this series to be uploaded every Tuesday going forward, so you can expect the next video to come out on Tuesday, September 17th. I'm planning to stick to that schedule, so hopefully there shouldn't be any more changes for some time. That being said, be sure to subscribe to make sure to not miss any future videos. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and this series grow thanks to you. As usual, you can check out Fantasy Trading Room as I'm a contributor for the NFL, Dynasty, and Fantasy pages there. If you haven't checked it out also, I do have a weekly article series on Fantasy Trading Room called the College Football Stock Report that identifies 8 players who had strong performances and 8 who hurt their draft stock after each weekend of college football. I include a link for the most recent addition to that in the description, and I'll continue to do this going forward. But thank you all and see you all next time.